Right, GCSE English Language Paper 1. I've tried to do it a few days earlier than the exam after feedback from some of the students. Right, I'm going to start by just directing you to the web address on the first slide. It's a really good website for revision resources, but it's probably the best place to go for past papers, the way they've collated them and the way they've labelled them, so it's really useful. They've put them all together. It's a really good place to find them. I'm going to be looking at June 2020 English Paper 1. I will attach copies, if I can, underneath the video. I'll save them in a Google Drive or something. But if not, you can go to this website, physicsandmathstutor.com. Past papers, AQA GCSE English. Click on June 2020. Right, the first thing I just want to highlight is the title of the paper. I'm not just going to go through it question by question. I think there is a little bit of traction, particularly if you're after the higher grades, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s. You're looking at the whole paper and trying and get a feel for the way it's been constructed, because it's been constructed in a very specific way to help children subconsciously, and if you can unpick that, I think it gives you a head start and also makes planning very easy. So if we look at the title of the paper, every single paper is called Explorations in Creative and Reading and Writing. So, and the focus is on the creative aspect. How is a writer engaging you, interesting you, making it exciting, making it emotional in some way. So it's that focus you need to look at. So this is the paper I want to look at. I presume it's in the public domain. You can download it off the AQA website, and it's on this Physics and Maths Tutor website. So it's an hour and 45. You don't forget that. You've got instructions on the front. You can read that. It allows you've got 2 sections. It is meant to be 45 minutes per section. The extra 15 minutes is for the reading, for the reading of the extract. Some of you won't need that 15 minutes. I suggest as a minimum you all use it, because there's reading and there's reading. Particularly if you're going to reread it before each question, that is probably going to quickly add up to 15 minutes. And if you're going to read it again for the writing to give you some ideas or inspiration, again, that's going to add up to that. I know you've been told this, I know you're going to ignore it, but do a plan, and I'll explain why in a minute. So, first thing I'll do, before you even look at the insert, is read the question paper. Every time I've been in the mock, kids are immediately starting on question 1. They obviously haven't read the whole extract, but they're thinking, it's 4 easy marks, I only need to read the first 4 lines. As soon as you do that, you start then to focus on the specifics of question 1 and 2. Questions 3 and 4 and 5 to an extent require a very holistic overview of the whole thing, but I'll explain why in a minute. So I think we read all 4 questions. So question 1 is simple information retrieval. It is just testing whether you can read, and it's also giving you a slight indicator as to where you're going later, in terms of and what the question focuses. So question 1, and there's 4 things about Rosie from this part of the source. This character, she must be important, particularly to question 3 and 4. Question 2, you get the section, you get which line, so there's no excuse for going outside the lines. How does a writer use language here to describe the garden? So we've got setting, we've got a character, and we've got a setting. So both those things are obviously integral to the extract and what the writer's trying to achieve. Question 3, you know what that question is going to be. How has the writer structured it? So as you read it, which we're going to do in a minute, you should be able to get a sense of it. It starts here and it goes here. Now question 4, I don't think you can do question 2 or 3 unless you've read question 4, because it gives you a clue as to where you should be looking. So a student said, I was not all surprised by the disappearance of a stranger child at the end of the extract. The writer has left us in no doubt she's just part of Rosie's imagination. So you immediately have a sense that this is about a strange child and maybe someone's imagining it. So we get elements of the unknown, of a mystery, of something maybe spooky, but it gives you an insight into the mood and atmosphere you're going to get when you read it. And then you always look at question 5, because as you're answering all the other questions, you'll be subconsciously thinking ahead to it, but also get some ideas. It is always linked in some way to what they give you in the extract. And if you wait until an hour into the exam and then you turn that page over and think, oh, a mysterious place, I haven't got a clue what to write. Well, you've just been reading about one. So, a description of a mysterious place, or a story, an event that cannot be explained. So we've got a strange child in someone's imagination, a mysterious place, or something that cannot be explained. They're all part of the same thing. So if you go, after you've read the whole question paper, this is the sort of thing that you should be thinking. I wouldn't expect you to write this down. You can, but as a simple revision exercise, is get a past paper and try and do this and the next slide and maybe the plan for the writing, just to get your head around how to approach it. Because if you can train yourself to think a certain way in the exam, you just save a hell of a lot of time. So obviously, the question was character, so there is some element of sympathy or empathy. We then get the garden, so we've got setting, which immediately means there's going to be mood and atmosphere is going to be part of it. And the structure, there is going to be some form of journey or progression. We've already seen that there's a character and there's a setting, which there is going to be in nearly every paper, but the emphasis on it probably suggests there is going to be some movement within the setting. And then you immediately get that word disappearance and Roger's imagination. So that should give you a clue as to what the mood and atmosphere is, which is fundamentally mysterious. And look, and the word's mysterious and can't be explained in question 5. So at this point, and I'm 7 minutes into the video, but I had a lot of waffle at the start, and within sort of 3-4 minutes, just by reading the questions and just thinking about this, you should immediately have a very good overview of what the extract is about and what they want you to understand about it, which is how as a writer created creatively a mysterious atmosphere or mysterious occurrence, and it's a good way of just checking your understanding is get a past paper and read the 4 questions and quickly check the mark scheme and look at the bullet points you get underneath the marking grid and think, yeah, I'm already on the right track. Because if you aren't on the right track to start with, you can go off on a bit of a tangent, you go down a blind alley, you find it harder to explain and justify your points because you've sort of got the wrong end of the stick, which happens. So, what can I teach you? Well, when you go back and read the insert, which I'm not going to do because I'm aware of how monotone my voice is, but I've attached it to the email to my students and as a Google Drive file underneath the video. Let's leave it on the screen. Well, you can always pause it, can't you? Right. So that's the first 3 paragraphs. I presume you can pause it if you need longer. The next 3 paragraphs. And the end. And hopefully it explains what Cinderella is, in case you don't know. So, once you've read the insert, it's not just a character. This Rosie, got a new house, new start, but it uses the word overwhelmed. So obviously you're going to do question 1 very straightforwardly. These are 4 things about her. However, you already got a sense of where this character has come from and where they're possibly going. Question 2, I've got to describe the garden in that paragraph. It's very ominous and threatening. It uses the word gnarled and twisted. These are quite aggressive words. And you've got the old and foreboding nature, but we'll get to that when we look at question 2. Or question 3. As you're reading it, you should immediately be thinking, oh, hang on, we've got a woman at a kitchen sink and washing up. Extremely domestic, extremely typical working mother. However, we do know that she's had to move, and the word trauma is used. But then we suddenly pivot to the strange garden and the strange appearance, who then disappears as Rosie enters the garden. So that journey into the garden, she has almost been drawn out of her domestic chores and maybe the way she's feeling, like by this strange occurrence that is in no way creepy. The little girl, I don't think in any sense comes across as dangerous or a threat. You know, she has urges to mother it, but we'll get to that. And then question 4, obviously, you only mentioned the lines that are specified in the question, but the whole overwhelmedness at the start and the word trauma, it makes it more understandable about as to why. And then obviously there's things like the left-handedness is quite a strong link. And as you're doing all that, it should be helping you get a sense of, right, how can I talk about a mysterious place or something that can't be explained? You got things here like the location, like the personification of the trees, like a child being described as slightly out of time. You know, there's lots of elements you can utilise. Right, question 1, and very straightforward. Again, I'm going to leave it for you to pause as you see fit, because I don't really want to read a lot. So, as long as you say Rosie is or Rosie has, you should be fine. There's 3 things there that would be rejected, but you've got a whole list of bullet points. There is no excuse not to get 4 marks. Again, just to be on the safe side, always put it as a coherent and point. So a full sentence. So she has just moved house. Or Rosie has just moved house. She sees a stranger child. Just make sure you've got she or a name in that question. Right, question 2. This is where we start to get the big marks. 8 marks on offer, as long as you explain yourself. Now, I've highlighted there all the things I think you could possibly talk about. You don't necessarily have to talk about all of them. If you talk about 3 or 4 and they're well explained, if you talk about maybe 3 of them in the same point, that'll be just as good, because you're explaining the use of language. Things are overgrown, a mess and a muddle, I wouldn't want to do separately. They're all the same thing. Ancient, massive, gigantic, you could describe in the same point and explain that gives the tree a sense of permanence, a sense of it should be there. It was there before the garden. It should still be there after. But something I would do as a plan, as a minimum, is the words at the bottom I've put in capitals. So as you're reading it, it says how is language to describe the garden. Well, in order to make sure you explain it, you need to think about the sort of words that description either conjures up or creates. So strange, ancient, threatening, abandoned, unkempt, mysterious. Those are the words that you're going to be using in your explanations. Because if you don't, you're not explaining the effects of language, you're not achieving the higher bands in the mark scheme. It's very easy to feature spot, very easy to say, the use of the word unfamiliar shows us she does not know it. The use of the word overgrown shows us it is not being cared for. The use of the word broken shows us that it can be dangerous. And they're all... But you're doing the same skill over and over, but you're not tying it all together. And that is the skill. It's how can you tie it all together. Now, the second paragraph here is directly from the mark scheme. This is what AQA say is a top band response. The writer develops the image of the mulberry tree as a dominating and supernatural force in the garden. Adjectives like massive and twisted establish the authoritative size and complexity of the tree, and this is further developed with a simile like a gigantic malformed hand. This personifies the tree and gives it a sense of deliberate intent, as if it rules over the elements of the garden around it. The hand could imply supernatural power that has a sinister influence on the rest of the garden. That's obviously very good. You're explaining the features, you're using the technical terms, personify, adjective. However, I also think there is a room for improvement. It might be me, but I would want to start with an overview statement. So can you at the start just get across how the whole passage makes the garden feel? And obviously, using a triplet, it's a very popular device. It shows you've got more than one idea. It also gives you 3 things to talk about. The garden is seen as an unknown stranger and brooding place. The word ancient not only adding an air of mystery, but also adding a layer of permanence, further emphasised by the way human constructions are left as mere broken bricks and chunks of cement. Now, I haven't really gone into explaining the alliteration there. You could probably do that next. But all that does is establish, with these 3 words, that you see the whole picture. I've used an integrated quote to show off that I can use quotes. And I've also tried to explain it in more than one way. Now, this is a list of things the exam board said you could use. Semantic field, if you use lexical field, and don't get overly stressed, they are at GCSE level, they can be used interchangeably. There's a slight difference with them, but as long as you get the right explanation with it, which is there is a lot of disorder suggested by these words, and also potential mystery, why things broke and why things are overgrown. Did no one care about the garden? Obviously the adjectives are used there to show how the mulberry tree dominates, and the simile is used to make the tree seem more than a tree. So as long as you are explaining in these end bits with any of these features, you can get a good mark. Right. Question 3. Now, you don't necessarily have to do this, but this is again another good revision strategy, is to get an insert. That website I suggested at the start and very good, or go to the AQA website. Is for each paragraph, just think, and what is the focus, what is the key element of that paragraph. And if you go through this extract, we get 2 things at the start. There's a sense in your beginnings with the commentary about they've moved, but also an immediate sense of mystery. We then go as a focus onto the details, and one thing this extract does very well is it sort of introduces the strange child and then moves away and describes the garden and then comes back to it. So it's almost a cliffhanger within a page, which it does in paragraph 3. Paragraph 4, there's a focus on the child and why she's so out of place, and it's the description. Like paragraph 5 is the short one where the woman is obviously doubting what she's seeing. Paragraph 6 zooms in particularly between Rosie and the child. We then focus on it, and then 8 we suddenly get this introduction of her maternal feelings, and then 9 is the fact that she moves away from the domestic chores into the garden and almost embracing her childhood or embracing something. So if you just go through any extract and think, right, is it focus, shift to zoom, introduction for each paragraph, that will give you 3 or 4 things to say in your answer. So question 3, again, second paragraph is from the exam board's exemplar top line answer. From the very first sentence, the writer carefully builds up the references to the stranger child and that run throughout the text. By introducing this unexplained element straight away, it immediately establishes a mysterious atmosphere of the extract. That's a good way of explaining why it's at the start. And when we learn at the same time that this is the first day at the house, the combination of these structural and features is a narrative convention for creating a sense of the unfamiliar within a supernatural genre. That's quite high level. It is realising that in other books that they've read, this happens a lot. When at the end it is suddenly revealed that she is gone, it completes a circular structure that deepens our understanding. So there's a mysterious girl and then there isn't. I've added this first bit in. Again, I've used similar words in each question. It doesn't matter, because if it's if it's still relevant, you're still going to get marks because you're talking about a different aspect. Rosie's journey is many layered, from the kitchen sink and domesticity to finally going out into the garden and childish uncertainty. The extract takes us from new beginnings to new mysteries. The ambiguous nature of the calm and trauma established at the start, continually heightened by the foreboding garden and the strange girl. There's always going to be a journey, there's always going to be movement, there's always going to be progression within the extract they give you. And if you can summarise that, you'll get good marks. And then explain it in detail, you get really good marks. Again, these are the things the exam board think you can mention. Narrative hook, so a thing at the start. The description, which is maybe hinting that her view is distorted, and there is that suggestion that the window isn't very clear because it's an antique glass. And the exposition of the character, sort of introducing the trauma and as to why they've moved. Focus, perspective, and the climax. Again, you don't need to mention all those things. I'd suggest 3. If you mention 3 of them and you explain them well, you're well on track to get top band mark. Right, I did want to keep this to half an hour, but never mind. Is it imagination? That's the key question. Question 4. Hang on. So, obviously, the key point in the statement is it an imagination? You are meant to agree. It is. The exam board have said this. I've been in meetings. I've seen it and said on online meetings, and I've read it. You are meant to agree with the statement. If you think about the range of students that do the exam, it'll be a little bit unfair to have a deliberately ambiguous statement. However, I would argue in this one it is quite ambiguous, but I can see the logic of why the student would think it. So always come into it with that in sense that actually I can see why the student sees that. So is it an imagination? Well, you've got the mystery as to why they've moved. Obviously that's before the section, but you can refer to it in briefly. Her sense of being overwhelmed again, that was set up earlier. So when we get down to the actual section they want to talk about, you've got the unthreatening actions of the girl. She's not doing anything particularly creepy. It's not, she's not climbing out of a well after you watch the videotape. Or mixing up horror films. I don't know. Lack of response by her children. We're not responding. So either she's not there, or she's really friendly. The links between Rosie and my child. So you've obviously got a left-handedness. The fact she sort of recognises what she's wearing vaguely. And the maternal feelings from her is that she wants to go and find her. She's worried how she's got in. She's worried if people are worried she's missing. She isn't who's in my garden in a strange place. She wishes to to help her to nurture, to show those maternal instincts. Right. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. You not have to cover all of them. The juxtaposition of reality and fantasy. You've got the fairy tale element is explicitly mentioned with Cinderella. The fact that the girl's furtive behaviour is borderline non-human, so animalistic, so which gives it more credence that it's something she's conjured up. The description of the other children, which implies that she's not even there. The supernatural connection, and obviously left-handed, which I'm sure a lot of smart kids have already got to. The word in Latin for left hand and for left is sinister, and it's the same like root word because they didn't trust left-handed people. It was a sign of being different and strange. Like, we couldn't understand why a few people weren't. And obviously the final line. The child was gone. Was it ever there? Ooh. Right then. Again, I've copied the exemplar answer and I've added in my own initial bit at the start. Despite Rose's initial thoughts, the writer includes so many clues that the girl is imaginary, we are not at all surprised when she disappears. So that's, you can understand why that's a top band answer. That's good. So the bit at the start, Rose's situation is ripe for flights of fancy and imagination. The ambiguous reasons for moving, the emphasis on tidiness, and a strange antique glass between her and a mysterious garden place her trapped in one role but yearning to be fulfilling another. Little bit tenuous, but that would be my way in. Right? Then this is what they say. Again, you can pause it if you need longer to read it. And then again, they say this is a very good way to write about question 4. The reader familiar with fairy tales know that they are characterised by sudden disappearances and unexplained events, so it is not remotely surprising to find that the girl has suddenly gone at the end. The writer has left clues throughout this section that there is something more supernatural occurring in the garden than Rosie ever realised, even if the reader suspected it from the very start. It's a good way of coming back to the start, and it's a good way of showing that you understand what the writer is doing. Right, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to do question 5 in a separate video because it's been 26 minutes and I'm struggling with my voice. I hope it's been vaguely useful. As I said, I'll attach the documents to it. You can read it at your leisure. But the key thing is, if you go back to the start, if you can understand why they're asking you the questions, and they are deliberately leading you through it. Question 1, can they read? Good, we can move on. Question 2, do they understand the effects of language and language devices? Good, move on. Question 3, do they understand the big AO2 ideas like structural things? Do they understand how there is a reason why that is first? Because it makes the ending so much more dramatic. There is a reason why we stop and suddenly have a description of the garden. Because we're asking about the little girl. Where's the little girl? Like, who is the little girl? And then question 4 is your evaluation. Can you see how a writer is trying to engage you emotionally, engage you in the characters in the story, get invested in it, and do you agree? And question 5 is how can you use all this? Right, I'll be back with question 5 at some point if I can't even stop it. Right, bye.